In the year of our Lord 1141, when frost still clung to the stones and the breath of men hung like smoke in the air, the city of Lincoln awaited its judgment. High upon its hill stood the castle, a proud bastion of stone, but beneath its shadow the townsfolk walked with bowed heads, for the drums of war thundered ever nearer. The bells of St. Mary's tolled without ceasing, not in joy, but in warning, their iron voices rolling across the streets, shaking hearts with dread. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke, for every hearth was stoked though food grew scarce, and the rumor of famine was whispered like a curse. Mothers clutched their children close, old men muttered prayers, and in every tavern the talk turned to Stephen, the king beleaguered, and to Matilda, the Empress who would have his crown. Among the anxious multitude was William, son of Edric the smith. Barely 15 winters had he seen, yet already his arms bore the scars of toil at the forge. He watched as carts of stone and timber rattled toward the castle gates, for the lords had ordered new barricades raised and the walls made fast. His father labored with the others, hammer striking iron with desperate haste, for war hung above them like a storm. That night, William stood outside his father's workshop, gazing toward the dark countryside. Fires flickered on the horizon, the campfires of armies drawing near. Each spark seemed a herald of doom. His heart pounded with fear and wonder alike, for though he was but a smith's boy, fate had already set its eyes upon him. And when the bells ceased their toll, replaced by the deep blare of horns, William knew the storm had come to Lincoln. At the castle's gate, a figure rode through the gathering dusk, Sir Robert of Hatherley, a knight whose armor gleamed like a river of silver under the waning sun. His steed's hoofs struck sparks from the cobblestones as he spurred onward, eyes like cold steel scanning the crowd. He sought men, yes, but more than men. He sought hearts steadfast under fear. William, drawn by the sound of the horse's approach, found himself pressed against the wall, mud and snow chilling his fingers. The knight's gaze fell upon him, piercing yet not unkind. "Boy," he called, voice echoing over the murmur of the townsfolk. "Come hither. Stand not idle while the walls of Lincoln are tested." The boy trembled. He had never held sword nor shield, yet something inside him stirred, a spark of courage, or perhaps curiosity. I am William, son of Edric the smith," he stammered. "William, son of Edric," Sir Robert repeated, nodding slowly. "Good steel runs in your veins, even if yet untempered in battle. You will be my squire. Swear to serve, and you shall learn to wield not only arms but honor." William's heart pounded like a drum of war. His father's hammer, his mother's prayers, the tolling bells, all seemed to press upon him in that moment. Yet he nodded, words caught in his throat, and followed the knight into the shadow of the castle, where the walls rose like sleeping giants waiting for the clash to come. Inside the courtyard, William glimpsed Lady Adelina for the first time. She stood upon the battlements, her hair a dark banner in the wind, her eyes distant and proud. She was a woman of secrets, her presence commanding, and yet her gaze lingered briefly on the boy as though weighing the measure of his soul. All around them, the city braced for siege. Mercenaries sharpened blades. Archers strung their bows. The air itself seemed alive with expectation. And above the murmur of the crowd, the distant horn of King Stephen's forces sounded, a call that would soon be answered with thunder and blood. That night, as William lay upon a straw pallet in the knight's chamber, he could hear the soldiers' murmurs, the clash of metal as arms were prepared, and the faint sobbing of those who had already lost hope. He clenched his fists, resolve hardening. Tomorrow, he thought, the storm would break. Tomorrow he would face it. Dawn broke with a sky of iron, the clouds swollen and gray as if the heavens themselves mourned what was to come. From the battlements of Lincoln, William could see the glint of steel in the distance. King Stephen's army marching forward, banners snapping in the wind, the thunder of hooves shaking the frozen ground. Sir Robert stood beside him, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "Remember, boy," he said, "fear is not shame. Let it guide you, but do not let it rule you." William nodded, though his stomach churned. He had never seen such numbers, such fury, concentrated into men and horses, marching to spill blood upon the earth. And yet, amidst the terror, a strange excitement surged. He was no longer merely a smith's son. He was a part of this world of steel and fire. The first clash came at the city gate. Mercenaries loyal to the Empress Matilda hurled themselves against the defenders with a roar, axes swinging, swords flashing. William, clutching a borrowed sword far too heavy for his arms, watched as men fell like trees in a storm. The cries of the wounded tore through the air, and the snow beneath their feet was soon stained red. A mounted knight bore down upon the gate, horse trampling a fallen man. Sir Robert met him with a thunderous charge, and William, frozen, saw the first kill of his life. The knight fell, sword clattering from his grasp, and Sir Robert's blade rose again. William's heart seized, a part of him rejoicing in the victory, a part of him recoiling in horror. Then came the smoke, curling from a nearby house set aflame, and the screams of women and children trapped inside. William turned away, nausea rising, but Sir Robert's firm grip steadied him. "This is war, William. Not all can be saved, but all must be faced." Above the din, Lady Adelina's voice rang, calling orders to archers. She moved among the soldiers with a grace and command that made even seasoned men glance aside. William felt a pang of awe and fear. She was a presence that seemed almost otherworldly amid the chaos. By the day's end, Lincoln had not yet fallen, but the cost was counted in the bodies strewn across the snow and the smoke rising from the outskirts of the city. William, hands trembling, knees aching, realized that he had survived his first battle, and that survival had etched a mark upon his soul. The night after the first clash brought no peace. The castle of Lincoln stood battered but unbroken, its walls groaning under the weight of the siege. Fires burned in scattered houses, and the smoke rose like dark banners into the cold sky. The townsfolk huddled behind barricades, murmuring prayers to saints, while soldiers sharpened blades and patched armor. William, weary and shivering, followed Sir Robert through the courtyard, past the fallen and dying. The boy had tasted blood, smelled it clinging to fur and leather, and felt the iron of it in his stomach. Yet the battle outside was only the surface. Within these walls, a darker war brewed. Lord Gilbert, a noble of questionable loyalty, whispered with emissaries in shadowed corners. Their glances darted like hawks, their words coated with honey and venom. "The king grows weak," one murmured, "and Lincoln shall fall if men do not act." William's ears pricked at such talk, though he did not understand fully. Sir Robert caught his gaze and gripped his shoulder. "Forget not your place, boy. Observe, but speak not." In the great hall, Lady Adelina paced like a storm, brow furrowed, her fingers tracing the edges of a map. William glimpsed the tension in her jaw, the way her eyes darted toward every lord who entered. She knew the weight of ambition, of promises made in shadow, and William realized that courage alone would not suffice. Cunning, loyalty, and the wisdom to discern truth from treachery were weapons just as vital as sword or shield. That night, whispers reached William even in his sleep. Voices in the corridors spoke of betrayals, of secret letters sent to the enemy, of mercenaries willing to sell their loyalty to the highest bidder. The boy lay on straw, heart thundering, realizing that the walls of Lincoln were not only beset by Stephen's foes but by men whose smiles hid daggers. Sir Robert found him at dawn, eyes heavy but resolute. "Remember, William, a man may fall to steel, but he may also fall to the cunning of men. Learn to see both, and perhaps you shall survive this storm." As the sun rose again over Lincoln, William understood that the battle for the city was not only fought with weapons, but with trust, suspicion, and the invisible blade of betrayal. And the boy who had dreamed of heroism now glimpsed the cruel, intricate face of war. The walls of Lincoln groaned under the weight of the day. Arrows thudded into timber and stone, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and sweat. From the battlements, William saw the enemy press closer, men in mail and leather, their banners snapping like furious tongues in the wind. Sir Robert led a sortie beyond the gate, William close behind, his sword clutched as though it could anchor him to courage. The snow beneath their feet was churned to mud and blood, a testament to the desperate struggle outside the walls. William's hands shook, and each step felt heavier than the last. Yet Sir Robert's presence steadied him, a reminder that fear could be harnessed into action. It was during this skirmish that William faced his first true trial. A mercenary, face scarred and eyes wild, lunged at him with a jagged blade. The boy froze, heart pounding, instincts faltering. Sir Robert's voice cut through the chaos. "Defend yourself, William. Remember your steel." The world narrowed to the sweep of the mercenary's arm, the hiss of the blade, and the bloodlust in the man's eyes. William swung his sword in desperation, striking the mercenary across the arm. The man fell, groaning, and William stood trembling, staring at the life he had taken. Pride and horror collided within him. He had survived, yet a shadow had fallen upon his soul. Back within the walls, Lady Adelina moved among the wounded, her composure unwavering even as bodies were carried past her. She gave William a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of what he had endured. The boy felt a strange kinship with her courage, though he could not yet match it. That night, as the city huddled behind its walls, the enemy's fires flickering on the horizon, William felt the weight of war pressing upon him like a vice. He had killed, yes, but he had also seen the suffering of innocents, the cruelty of mercenaries, and the fear etched in the faces of townsfolk. The storm had begun in earnest, and there was no turning back. In the silence, Sir Robert whispered as he checked the defenses. "Remember, William, steel can protect, but only wisdom can save. Learn both or Lincoln will be lost, and you along with it." By the third day of the siege, Lincoln's walls trembled under the onslaught. The enemy had massed in the valley below, a sea of banners, pikes, and armored men pressing ever closer. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the pounding of hooves, the roar of commanders, and the clash of metal against metal. Snow, once pristine, was now a canvas of mud and blood. William stood atop the battlements, gripping his sword, eyes wide with the scale of the fury below. Sir Robert positioned him beside the archers, teaching the boy to aim and release, though his hands shook with terror and anticipation. "Steady, William. Your aim may yet save lives today," the knight bellowed. From the eastern gate came the first charge. Cavalry surged like thunder, banners snapping in the wind. William felt the ground quake beneath him as horses crashed into the palisade, men screaming, and the walls shuddered under the weight of men and steel. Archers loosed their arrows, and William's own bowstring sang as he released his first shot into the ranks of the enemy. The melee below was a tide of violence. Mercenaries fell, lords shouted orders, and soldiers fought like cornered wolves. William's heart raced, caught between exhilaration and terror. He saw Sir Robert clash with a hulking knight, their swords ringing like church bells in the frozen air. Sparks flew as steel met steel, and William felt both awe and a sharp fear that the man he admired could be struck down at any moment. Amidst the chaos, Lady Adelina appeared on the wall beside him. Her cloak whipped in the wind, and her eyes burned with resolve. "Hold your ground, boy. Every arrow, every blade counts," she shouted. William nodded, gripping his sword tighter, the weight of responsibility pressing upon him. The battle raged for hours, yet the city held. Every time a section of the wall trembled, Sir Robert's voice cut through, "Stand firm! We are Lincoln's shield." And in the midst of terror, William found a strange clarity. He was no longer merely a boy in fear. He was part of the defense, part of something greater than himself. As night fell, the city was scarred but unbroken. Fires dotted the outskirts, smoke curling like malevolent fingers into the sky. William, exhausted and trembling, looked at the devastation and understood that war demanded more than courage. It demanded endurance, cunning, and a heart capable of surviving horrors yet unseen. As the fires of battle smoldered and the snow turned to slush beneath the walls of Lincoln, the threat within grew as dangerous as the enemy without. Whispers followed William wherever he went. Lords huddled in secret, mercenaries eyed one another with suspicion, and even some townsfolk seemed to vanish into the night only to return with furtive glances and quiet murmurs. One evening, while carrying water to the archers atop the northern walls, William overheard Lord Gilbert speaking with a man garbed in plain brown, his hood shadowing his face. The words were few but sharp. "The gates will open. The city falls not to Stephen's foes, but to our hands." William froze, heart pounding. Sir Robert's earlier warnings came rushing back. Men could be sharper than swords, and some wounds were invisible until they struck. Yet he did nothing but retreat, praying that his presence had not been noticed. Lady Adelina, aware of these shifting currents, summoned William to the battlements. "See what you must, William," she said, her voice low. "Watch carefully. The greatest danger often comes from those you trust." Her eyes bore into his, and he felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his young shoulders. That night, William struggled with fear and doubt. Could he reveal what he had heard? Should he confide in Sir Robert, or risk the anger of those plotting treachery? Every corner seemed filled with shadows, and every shadow a potential threat. Sleep fled him, replaced by the echo of whispered words and imagined betrayals. In the quiet hours before dawn, the boy realized that survival would require more than courage on the battlefield. It would demand discernment, loyalty, and a careful weighing of every word, every glance, every action. Lincoln's walls might hold against steel, but could they hold against deceit? As the first light of morning touched the city, William looked to the horizon where King Stephen's banners flapped against the wind. The siege had become a war on two fronts, one of blood and fury outside, and one of cunning and treachery within. The siege of Lincoln had reached its fevered pitch. The city walls shook under the relentless assault, catapults hurling stones that splintered timber and sent shards of brick flying like deadly hail. William, now hardened beyond his years, moved alongside Sir Robert, carrying water to the wounded and steadying the archers on the ramparts. Amid the chaos, the boy faced his deepest trial. A group of mercenaries, supposed allies, had been caught attempting to bribe a gate guard to let them escape, or perhaps to open the gate to the enemy. William saw them with his own eyes, knives glinting, coins clutched in bloodied hands. He felt the pull of temptation, a whisper in his mind, to look away, to let fear guide his choice. Sir Robert appeared beside him, eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene. "What say you, William? Stand idle or do what is right?" For a heartbeat, William froze, every instinct screaming for safety. Then something inside him broke free. The forge in his blood, the hammer of his father, the courage he had discovered in the earlier battles. He seized a fallen club and charged, striking the nearest mercenary with a blow that sent the man sprawling. Chaos erupted, screams echoing against the walls, and in that moment, William realized he could choose honor over fear. Lady Adelina appeared, her cloak swirling in the wind as she took command of the situation, dispatching guards to secure the traitors. She nodded to William, a fleeting acknowledgement, and he felt a surge of pride. He had acted rightly, and yet the blood on his hands and the tremor in his arms reminded him that virtue demanded courage, and that courage came at a cost. The rest of the day passed in a haze of smoke and battle cries. Stones rained from above, arrows whistled past, and William moved as if in a fevered dream, learning with every step that survival required both steel and wisdom. The siege pressed on, and he understood that the trial he faced was not a single moment but a continuous test of heart, mind, and spirit. As night fell once more, Lincoln still stood, scarred but unbroken. William, exhausted and wounded in spirit, knew that the trials were only beginning, and that the storm of war would demand more than he had yet imagined. The morning air was sharp and biting, carrying the distant rumble of hooves that shook the frozen earth. From the horizon came the glint of polished armor and the flutter of banners. King Stephen himself had arrived with reinforcements. The sight of the royal host sent a ripple of hope through the beleaguered defenders of Lincoln. Yet William, standing atop the walls with Sir Robert, knew that hope and danger were but two sides of the same coin. The enemy, emboldened by days of siege, surged forward with renewed fury, and the two armies collided at the base of the hill with a thunderous roar. The clash of swords and shields rang out like the hammering of the forge itself, echoing over the valley. Horses screamed, men shouted, and the smell of blood mingled with the smoke of fire and the iron tang of sweat. William found himself in the midst of the chaos, ducking under swinging axes, pushing fallen comrades from the way, and firing arrows into the press of Matilda's forces. Every moment demanded split-second choices, to act or freeze, to strike or retreat. He saw Sir Robert throw himself into the fray, cutting down a knight who threatened to breach the walls, and felt a surge of both fear and admiration. Lady Adelina moved with swift precision, directing archers, rallying soldiers, and tending to the wounded. William glimpsed the exhaustion in her eyes, the faintest tremor of her hand, and realized that courage was as much a matter of will as it was of steel. Amid the din, William witnessed a banner fall. A lord he had briefly trusted was struck down, and the soldiers around him wavered. The boy's heart pounded, but he remembered Sir Robert's words, "Steel may defend, but heart and honor guide the hand." He pressed forward, raising his sword and stepping over fallen men, fighting not for glory but to protect those who could not defend themselves. By nightfall, the battle had reached a perilous balance. Lincoln still stood, though the snow was thick with blood and mud, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the streets. William, battered and bruised, understood that the war for England's crown was far larger than any one city. Yet the choices made here, on these frozen walls, would shape history in ways both glorious and tragic. The night after the king's arrival brought a chill that seemed to seep into the bones of the city itself. Lincoln's walls, though still standing, bore fresh scars, and the streets were littered with the remnants of the day's carnage. Yet it was not the enemy outside that now threatened the defenders, but the whispers of treachery within. William had learned to listen to the subtle currents of suspicion, and that night they coalesced into a revelation. Lord Gilbert, the same noble who had once spoken of secret dealings, was plotting openly now, conspiring with a band of mercenaries to betray the city at dawn. William's heart raced as he realized the scope of the danger. The walls could hold against steel, but not against betrayal from within. He ran to Sir Robert, breath ragged, explaining what he had overheard. The knight's eyes darkened with fury. "So it begins," he muttered. "A sword may strike down a man, but a traitor can strike a city." Together, they moved to alert Lady Adelina, who received the news with a steely calm that unsettled William. She nodded once, her eyes sharp and unwavering. "Then we shall cut the serpent's head before it strikes," she said. At dawn, as the first light touched the snow-drenched battlefield, chaos erupted not only from the enemy outside but from the traitors within. Mercenaries moved to the gates, only to find Sir Robert and William intercepting them, swords drawn and hearts unflinching. The clash was swift and brutal, steel ringing against steel, men falling on both sides. William fought with a courage born of necessity, striking, parrying, and dodging in a haze of fear and fury. When the dust settled, the traitors lay defeated, and Lord Gilbert himself had vanished into the morning fog. Lincoln's walls remained unbroken, but the city had learned a cruel lesson. Vigilance in war must extend not only outward but inward, for even the strongest defenses cannot withstand the dagger of deceit. William, exhausted and trembling, felt a bitter satisfaction. He had survived, defended the city, and faced treachery firsthand. Yet in the pit of his stomach, he knew that the war was far from over, and that the true test of courage and honor still awaited. The sun rose red as blood over Lincoln, casting long shadows across the snow-streaked battlefield. By mid-morning, the city's defenders faced the full fury of Matilda's forces, now pressing with relentless determination. The clash of arms echoed from the gates to the battlements, and the air was filled with the metallic tang of steel and the cries of the dying. William found himself swept into the heart of the battle, no longer merely a boy observing from the walls. Archers and infantry collided in a maelstrom of violence, horses rearing, and swords slicing through armor. Each step he took brought him closer to death, yet each movement steeled his resolve. Sir Robert was everywhere at once, cutting down attackers and rallying soldiers with shouts that rose above the chaos. William stayed at his side, parrying blows, striking with all the strength he could summon, and discovering within himself a courage he had not known he possessed. Amid the tumult, William glimpsed Lady Adelina atop the wall, directing archers with precise, unyielding authority. She seemed untouchable, a force of will in a world of chaos, yet even she was not immune to the cost of war. A stray arrow claimed a soldier beside her, and the boy saw the fleeting pain flash across her face. The battle surged like a tide. Men fell beneath his feet, banners were torn and trampled, and the snow beneath them became a dark, sticky field of mud and blood. William felt terror, exhilaration, and grief all at once. He struck down a soldier who lunged at Sir Robert, and the act seared itself into his memory. His first deliberate kill in the heart of battle. By the day's end, Lincoln remained standing, though battered and scarred. The cries of the wounded filled the air, mingling with the moans of the dying. William, bloodied and shaking, understood the harsh truth. War did not grant heroes, only survivors, and the price of courage was measured in the souls of those who fought. Night fell over Lincoln like a shroud, heavy with smoke and the acrid stench of blood. The walls still stood, yet the city bore the scars of a day drenched in violence. Fires smoldered where homes had burned, and the snow, once pure, lay dark and trampled, dotted with the fallen. William moved through the courtyard, helping the wounded where he could. The boy had grown in ways that frightened him. His hands were smeared with blood, his ears still rang with the clang of steel, and his heart ached with the weight of the lives he could not save. Sir Robert returned from the walls, exhausted, his armor battered. At his side, a young squire had fallen, struck down by a mercenary's blade. William felt a hollowness in his chest as he watched the knight kneel to pray for the boy's soul. "War takes more than it gives," Sir Robert muttered, voice raw. "Remember this, William. It will shape you as surely as sword and shield." Lady Adelina moved among the survivors, her face pale, eyes haunted. She spoke quietly to the men and women she could comfort, yet even her composure faltered when she found a messenger slain, a letter torn in half beside him. William glimpsed her grief, restrained but profound, and understood that even the strongest could bend under the weight of loss. The boy found himself alone for a moment atop the walls, staring at the horizon where fires burned like dying stars. He felt despair like a living thing inside him, a gnawing, hollow fear that whispered of futility and the cruelty of fate. He had survived, yes, but at what cost? How many names, faces, and lives would haunt him forever? Yet amid the sorrow, a spark endured. Sir Robert's words, Lady Adelina's courage, the resilience of the townsfolk. They reminded William that even in the darkest hours, bravery and honor persisted. War would leave scars, yes, but it also forged bonds, and he would carry both the pain and the strength into the days yet to come. The morning broke with a brittle chill, the air tense with anticipation. King Stephen's forces and Matilda's army faced each other in the valley below, their banners snapping like the tongues of angry wolves. The siege had drawn to its pivotal hour, a clash that would determine the fate of Lincoln and perhaps all of England. From the battlements, William watched the enemy advance, a living tide of steel and fury. Sir Robert positioned him near the gate, whispering, "Steady, boy. Today you see the measure of men and the measure of yourself." William nodded, gripping his sword and feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The two armies collided with a roar that shook the hill. Cavalry thundered, archers loosed their volleys, and the ground became a quagmire of mud and blood. William found himself in the midst of it, dodging, striking, and parrying, each moment a battle of instinct and will. Amid the chaos, he saw Sir Robert engage a fearsome knight. The man towered over the knight, axe in hand, eyes blazing with fury. Steel clashed, sparks flying, and William felt a pang of terror and awe. He knew that the outcome of this duel could change the course of the battle. Summoning courage, he stepped forward, helping defend Sir Robert from a flanking enemy. Lady Adelina moved across the walls like a force of nature, coordinating the archers and rallying the soldiers. Her voice rang clear, cutting through the din of war. William caught her gaze, and for a moment, the fear that had gripped him seemed to fall away. He was no longer a boy. He was a participant in the forging of history. Hours passed in a blur of violence and strategy. Men fell, banners were torn, and the snow beneath them darkened to crimson. Yet, when the dust settled and the enemy was repelled, Lincoln still stood, battered but unbroken. William, exhausted and bloodied, looked around at the cost. Fallen comrades, wounded soldiers, and a city scarred by the fury of men. In that moment, he understood that bravery and sacrifice were inseparable. The battle had carved its mark upon him, shaping the boy into a witness of history, a survivor, and a keeper of memory. The snow had melted into a gray, slushy mire, and the air was heavy with smoke and sorrow. Lincoln, though still standing, bore the scars of the fiercest battle in living memory. Streets were littered with the fallen, barricades splintered, and the moans of the wounded mingled with the occasional tolling of church bells for the dead. William moved among the survivors, helping where he could, yet his hands trembled from exhaustion and the weight of what he had seen. The victory had been hard-won, but it came at a price that no feast or celebration could erase. Sir Robert, battered and weary, clasped him on the shoulder. "Remember this day, William. Victory is sweet, but it is forged in suffering." Lady Adelina convened the remaining lords and commanders, her voice commanding even in the shadow of loss. The political currents shifted swiftly. Alliances had been tested, traitors exposed, and loyalty proved under fire. King Stephen's position was strengthened by the defense, but the cost was clear. England was scarred, and the crown precarious. William understood for the first time the scale of consequence beyond the battlefield. War was not only blood and steel. It was betrayal, ambition, and the delicate balance of power. The city's survival had altered the political tide, yet the lives of men and women had been irrevocably changed. He visited the dead where he could, offering silent prayers. Each name, each face, etched itself into his memory. Among them was the young squire who had fallen beside Sir Robert, his bravery unforgotten. William felt both grief and a strange kinship, realizing that the threads of heroism and tragedy were tightly entwined. As the city began to rebuild, the boy who had arrived with the first tolling of the bells emerged as someone older, tempered by fire and loss. He had seen glory and terror, treachery and loyalty, despair and fleeting triumph. And he understood that the Battle of Lincoln would echo far beyond the stones of its walls, shaping kingdoms, destinies, and the very lives of those who had stood upon them. Years would pass, yet the echoes of Lincoln would never fade from William's memory. The city, once a trembling bastion on the edge of catastrophe, had endured, and so had he, though not unchanged. The boy who had arrived amid the tolling of bells had grown into a man forged by fire, blood, and sorrow. He walked among the rebuilt streets, now quieter, save for the soft murmur of survivors rebuilding homes and lives. The scars of war were visible in every stone, every scarred wall, every hollowed gaze. William remembered the cries, the clashing of swords, the smoke and blood, and the courage that had carried them through the storm. Sir Robert had long since departed on other campaigns, leaving William with words that had become a compass. Steel may defend the body, but honor shapes the soul. Lady Adelina remained, her presence a testament to resilience, guiding the city through the treacherous currents of politics, her courage a beacon in a world of uncertainty. The names of those who had fallen, brave soldiers, loyal knights, traitors, and innocents alike, were carved into William's heart. He had learned the bitter truth that war gives no true victors, only survivors, and that even victory leaves its indelible scars. Yet in surviving, in remembering, they had shaped history. William, once a smith's son, now understood the weight of legacy. The Battle of Lincoln had preserved a crown, reshaped alliances, and altered the fate of England. But it had also left a mark on those who fought, a testament to courage, honor, and the resilience of the human spirit. As he gazed upon the horizon, the sun rising over the snow-mottled fields, William whispered a prayer for the fallen and a vow for the living. The city endured, the story endured, and so too did the memory of those who had stood, bled, and fallen in the shadow of Lincoln's walls. The chronicles would remember them, and William knew, with a clarity born of fire and blood, that he would never forget. Thus ends the tale of William, the Battle of Lincoln, and the legacy carved in steel, snow, and the hearts of men. A story of courage and despair, of honor and sacrifice, set forever in the annals of England during the dark days of the Anarchy.